Doors open.
Holy happy hour, Batman! I am Ben. I am known as that gamer priest sometimes on social media, and I forgot to hit go live on YouTube. You know, it happens. If it'll let me, I'll hit it. Hey, I'm also a games enthusiast. On this show, I am joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about life, faith, game design philosophy, um, spirituality sometimes, religion sometimes, and whatever else comes up. Hey, YouTube, we're on. I forgot to go live on YouTube, but we're on YouTube now. So welcome on YouTube, folks. Tonight we have another great guest. I'm really excited to have Brian Hazzard joining us in just a few minutes. Brian is the creator of One Night Worlds on Kickstarter now and host of Instant Death Survivor Support Group. One Night Worlds is a collection of zero prep, GM-less, one-page TTRPGs, which is, I love that. That's such a jam of mine. We'll talk about why probably on the show. I really want to get into it with Brian. But One Night Worlds, with each of the included games, you can learn the rules, create characters, and discover a whole new world with your friends all in one night. You'll be guided by a simple TTRPG rule system that emphasizes collaborative storytelling and creates dramatic moments of risky choices. So stick around. We're going to get into all of that and more in just a few minutes with Brian. I'm really excited to have him here on the show. Tonight I want to remind you all that you can pick up the ebook edition of my game, Broken, a tragic romance game, on the Apon Games itch page at any time. We're working on the final version of that game and expect to deliver that to those who buy it. We're expecting to deliver that in October. If you pick it up right now on our apongames.itch.io/broken, you can get the Ashcan edition immediately and start playing Broken. If you don't know what that is, it is a breakup game about breaking real life physical objects. The full version of that ebook, like the final ebook edition, will be done hopefully really soon, and we'll get it out to you. We're working on it right now. We've added a bunch of safety tools. I'm really excited about seeing it fleshed out. I'm really excited for it to wrap up. Also, remember that I am the GM and host of Delinquent Comics, a Masks actual play podcast about a team of misfit heroes fighting against a fascist megacorp dystopia. You can listen to Delinquent Comics wherever podcasts are found. We drop new episodes every other Monday, so a week from today there'll be another new episode. This is the time for you to catch up on our Vega Rising arc, which is the story arc we've been in. It's really, really fun. Fabulous cast. I love my cast. They're the best. They're way better than me. You should check it out so you can listen to them because they're awesome. So that's why. All right, so it is happy hour, and as you can see, we do have a really fun cocktail up on the screen inspired by our guest this week. I am pretty hyped about this cocktail because it's really good, and I like rum cocktails. This one is inspired by one of the games in One Night Worlds, which I feel like I am going to butcher the game that is inspired by. Oh my gosh, I'm just having one of those moments where I didn't write it down on my notes and I'm just completely spacing. So, that's why I'm hence the stalling. But I'm going to look it up real quick while I'm stalling. But this is a really fun, spicy cocktail. It's called Fey and Fire, I think is what I call it. Fey and Fire. And it is inspired by one of the games you can get in the One Night World collection if you back it on Kickstarter. This is inspired by the Fires of Chitera, which is a really cool setting. A surreal fairy tale setting where the spirit of every person, animal, and plant can speak if you listen. The world is burning, and the Fae have been forced into hiding. The mushroom people fight for equality, and the beloved king Eric is lost in eternal slumber. So it sounds really fun, and I wanted to create something spicy for it. And so what I did was I took 1.5 ounces of aged rum. That's not like a spiced thing. It's just delicious. A half an ounce of spice rum, a half ounce of triple sec, half ounce of lime juice, half ounce of grenadine so it gets like a nice red color, and a 1/4 ounce of demerara syrup. That, if you don't know what demerara syrup is, I use it a lot in our recipes, and it is a kind of simple syrup. It's like demerara sugar, if you don't know, is a kind of like, it's not quite brown sugar, but it's not quite refined cane sugar. It's sort of in between, and you just kind of make that into a syrup, simple syrup by boiling it with water and creating your own homemade demerara syrup. You could probably buy it too, but I just don't know why you would bother. And then I want you to do a sprinkle of cayenne pepper and any hot sauce to taste. You can kind of regulate how spicy you like your own cocktail here. But yeah, combine all those ingredients, the rum, the triple sec lime juice, grenadine, syrup, pepper, hot sauce, into a cocktail shaker with ice. Shake until really well combined, and then strain that thing into a coupe or martini glass or cocktail glass. Garnish with a lime wedge and a cherry. But make sure you use the really good Italian, like, maraschinos, the ones that are like in that real thick sweet juice, not like cheap maraschino cherries. They're just so much better. And that's the drink for the week. Let's see, it's 7:40 p.m. Eastern time as I'm recording this, as we're streaming this. In about 5 minutes, the recipe card for this cocktail will be up on my Twitter account, and you can check it out there, grab it, download it, make it. If you do, please remember to let me know. That's what I ask. Let me know you tried it. It's a really great cocktail, and I hope you will enjoy. So let's go ahead and, without further ado, let's bring our guest, Brian, forward. I'm excited to chat with Brian tonight. And you know, it would have been really helpful if I had changed the name tag, the name place. Wow, I'm really off today. That's right, I'll fix it as we're talking here. You're not Aaron, you're Brian. Brian, welcome to the show.
I wish I was Aaron.
Aaron's a good name.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for taking the time during, campaigns are busy, and you're in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, it's been a fun challenge. I come from a marketing-ish background, okay. And so, but I've never marketed one of my own products. Oh. So it's been an interesting exercise to try and overcome the slumps that happen in a campaign. You know?
Yeah, now that is interesting, and I end up talking about this kind of thing a lot with people who are creators. And yeah, I'm just curious, what has that been like for you to be marketing your own product? Something you made, something you're invested in, right? Emotionally and in all kinds of ways.
Yeah, it's been exciting. A lot of it has, I don't know. I haven't given it enough thought, but I've been wanting to. I like the way that the Kickstarter stretch goals kind of push me, and it's almost like a game of chicken of like, do I really want to add this? Can I really commit myself to this? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's been really exciting.
It's tough, right? Then, like I talked to a lot of creators, and I've heard a lot of feedback from creators about how dangerous I think we were talking about this on a recent episode. I don't remember with who. How dangerous those stretch goals are, because it can really throw off your equations for like figuring out value and cost and things like that if you're just not careful. And if you feel the constant need to like create another stretch goal, you can really scope creep the heck out of your project.
Yep. Yeah, this particular project, I was okay with that because my intention wasn't to make a lot of money. My intention was to so first of all, my costs are low because it's a digital delivery, right? Yeah. So I don't have to worry about like, oh no, I put myself in a hole, Yep. Other than my time, which is valuable.
It is.
But I was willing to make that trade-off because I was viewing this more as, in the marketing world, we call it a lead magnet, right? Trying to attract people to take an interest in these games and in my work and build a relationship that hopefully I can, keep moving forward for future projects as well, rather than having, people quote unquote pay what it's worth, if that makes sense.
It does.
Hence why there's a $1 tier in there, trying to make it so that there's really no reason why you wouldn't go, well, I could spend $1.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and if you don't mind, give us the elevator pitch. I know I kind of introduced the project a little bit already, but go ahead and give us the elevator pitch for One Night Worlds and what it is, and maybe even why someone should back it.
Yeah, absolutely. So One Night Worlds is a collection of zero prep, GM-less, one-page TTRPGs.
You've got that. You've either reading that or you've been memorized it because you've been doing a campaign for a little while.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes,
sorry. I should have interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. It is absolutely memorized, although mid-phrase I was like, oh God, am I going to stumble over this? And so I'm a relative noob to the world of RPGs.
Okay.
I'm not. I think a lot of your guests probably started playing when they were, tykes, and
It's a
they've been
mixed.
playing
It's
ever
a
since.
mix. It's a mix. Well, I definitely will be asking you about your TTRPG background at some point here. So,
Yeah, sure. So we'll get into that, but
yeah.
so as a relative noob, and also like a lot of my history in RPGs was like started right at the pandemic, basically, right?
Okay.
So finding groups was challenging, and investing the time when you weren't sure if you'd actually get play sessions in like understanding a setting, all those sorts of things, really went into what was going on with One Night Worlds. Which, so my taste in games is absolutely like I like the rules to be like quick to understand, right? I like the setting to be what a lot of people call anti-canon, right? I don't want to feel like I have to be an expert in something. And I want it to be, of course, fun, right? Um, and that's what I think One Night Worlds does. It's based on the push system, which Cesar Caboclo created. I think earlier this year, was February of this year was when he created that and,
Yeah,
and
it's
published it.
new. Yeah.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
now there's something like 60 games in the system, I think.
Isn't that insane?
Last, yeah,
I think that's
it.
just insane.
Well, he did such a great job of making it a low barrier to entry, and like
Yeah.
it's not just a great set of mechanics. In some ways, it's like a hand-holding thing that like walks you through the design process.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a hats off to Cesar for his great work on the Push SRB.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So, how many games are in the collection?
So we're at 5 games right now,
Okay.
and that's where it's going to stop because there's like multiplying effects, because we some of the stretch goals were like, and now they get character playbooks and this sort of thing. And so every time I add a game, it's like, oh, so that's 20 more character playbook. Anyway,
Yeah.
so there's 5 right now. 4 are like well defined in the
Okay.
campaign, like exactly what they are, and the 5th one is like
A bunch of
a
question
mystery.
marks. I see that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to talk about a little bit like why I think this is a cool. I think it's cool for a lot of reasons. I think as someone who's interested in marketing and marketing TTRPGs, I think it's interesting, but that's kind of on a different level, right? For like, the kind of behind the scenes level. But as someone who plays games, I'm interested in this in a certain way. Which you mentioned, like people who have been playing since they were tykes or new, and actually like it's a pretty good mix of people that I've had on the show, both like really experienced creators who are like have had a lot of success with their games, who are like kind of more well known in indie games, as well. Like some of them are people who played a long time, some of them are pretty new. I mean, kind of famously, like I had Hannah Schaefer and Evan Rollins, who are Turtle Bun, who are kind of famous for Questlandia and for games like Damn the Man, Save the Music. Like they were, at least Hannah. I don't recall Evan's story actually, but like at least Hannah was kind of famously like very new to RPGs, really just started to experience RPGs, and met people that were like, hey, have you ever thought about making them? And like all of that, like that's why Questlandia is like kind of like you were saying with One Night Worlds. It's like for people who are also kind of new to RPGs, right? Like it's very much like doesn't expect you to know anything or everything going into it. Like it's very much like that experience of like that's what I like about One Night Worlds. I really like games like that. I do try when I do game design, at least some of the times, if that's who my audience is, to think about like, because I run a game club every Saturday night. This is where it's self-serving. I run a game club every Saturday night in my town. And we have board games. We also have TTRPGs, and we have a huge range of people. Like people who are very experienced, and people who have literally never played a TTRPG before. It's their first time, and so I'm constantly thinking about those people. Or like when I played with my mom for the first time, and we played. That was actually Dread, by the way. My mom's first TTRPG was Dread, and like so I think about those people, and like this bundle of games is like so ideal for like my game club, because it's one night, They don't have to know anything going into it. They could just sit down, learn the rules, and play the game in one session. And like, I just feel like these days, with the way people play RPGs, and the way people manage their time, and in a post-pandemic or pandemic world, that's kind of like where a lot of games have to fall. So yeah, I mean, I don't. That's not a question. That's just like really.
As an example,
Yeah.
as an example of that, so many games, like, it's hard to get, and this isn't a knock, it's just a different experience. It's hard to get a satisfying experience or session out of less than several hours of play. And the One Night Worlds, which is based on that push system,
Yeah.
You can absolutely take this for several hours, and it will work well. And in fact, you could take it for sessions. It's built in such a way that, like, you could do a whole campaign, and especially, like, I've got a campaign edition that adds even more to it to make that possible. But on the other hand, as an example of that, I did play a session of The Fires of Chitera that you based that cocktail off of, with Cesar on my YouTube channel. And we were able to get what I think was a really satisfying story it was about 45 minutes of play.
Wow, 45 minutes is so short. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really great. And I mean, some caveats to that, like, we only went to the dice maybe 3 times, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it really lent itself to a narrative first sort of experience, and let us, it removed a lot of the sort of crunchy cruft and let us get right into play. And yeah, we were able to get it done in about 45 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we even have, like, that's so cool. Like, I'm just thinking about the fact that, like, for my game club, we usually have, like, a good 2 to 3 hours, right? That's a decent session. Like, that's a decent session. But here's the problem, I think. When you add in lots of chatting, lots of side conversations, lots of people in the other room also that you're going to break off and end up talking to, lots of trips to the kitchen for beverages, lots of trips upstairs for people who smoke, and then suddenly your 3-hour session is like an hour, an hour and a half, because you've lost a lot of time to that. So, like, that really cuts it down. I'm also curious, when you think of a campaign these days, like, and I know you said you're newer to TTRPGs, and that actually is part of my impetus for asking you specifically this question.
Sure.
Like, what is a length, you think, of a normal campaign these days? Like, how long does a campaign run for, sessions wise?
Oh, gosh.
Numbers of sessions, would you say?
I mean, so it's funny you asked that. I don't know that I've actually had a continuous campaign of more than 4 sessions.
Yeah, there you go.
So real short, set of.
I've been thinking 6. 4 might even be more accurate than that. 6 might even be optimistic. I'm wondering if most people's campaigns these days don't last more than 4 to 6 sessions, and that's a campaign.
I'm currently working on getting. I've got a stack of games over here from Possum Creek that I want to get to the table. So
Nice.
I'm looking at Wanderhome, Our Haunt, and what's the other one? Sleepaway, right?
Nice.
And so I've been, trying to kind of find the right group of people who would enjoy those games. And, right now I'm at two people who are ready to play. And so, I could probably make it work with that. But I'd like to have one more person. But anyway, the sort of chief negotiating point for people has been, well, tell me about the time commitment. How many sessions are we talking about here? That sort of thing. And what I arrived at was like 3 to 4. Basically, I'm telling you 3 so you'll commit, but I want it to be 4.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, do you know why I know the struggle of this? It's not from TTRPGs. It's from church. Like, if I ask somebody to do something these days related to church, the first question is, what's the commitment? What are we talking about? What's the commitment level? Are we talking how many times, how many meetings, how often? And I mean, it's just the struggle is real these days for people are so overcommitted and overstretched across 1,000,000,001 different things that they're doing, I feel like.
right.
Yeah.
When it's especially true, like the people that I'm talking to, this is local people, and
Yeah.
One of them is not really an RPG player, and the other one is a D&D dungeon master, right? So a very different kind of experience for them. And so I think there's a little bit of like, man, I don't even know if I'm gonna like this, right? And
Okay.
right, and so not me personally. I'm
No, right, sure.
confident that I'll like it, but like, and so
Yeah.
I can see like people say like, yeah, we have an open door policy and that sort of thing, and I commend that. But I think still there's like a internal hesitance to like feel guilty about leaving or something like that, So
Oh man, you want to hear something that's a bummer, and we'll keep talking about the actual conversation. I'm pretty sure YouTube glitched out and only actually just started streaming to YouTube, even though it should have
hey,
when I said it
YouTubers.
before. That's really depressing. Oh, that's okay. This will be fully on YouTube afterward. It'll just be more of a process than that. But if you're joining us on YouTube right now, what a weird moment to jump into the show. But anyway, yeah, I think your instincts on all this stuff is right and really interesting. I did have a follow up that now I've confused myself and lost it about it. But those are all great games, by the way. If you and I'm really excited about Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast, which I was an enthusiastic backer for. We were lucky to have Jay come on the show right after Yazeba's campaign finished, and we could talk all about that. But that's Yazeba's is a good example of a game that I am really excited to bring to my game club, because like the chapter system, right, is like perfect for those kinds of things. You don't have to really know any rules. You can just kind of go into it, pick up a character, start playing really quickly. May or may not ever play in it again. It kind of has that.
It's exactly my jam. Now I haven't
Yeah.
actually played Yazeba's yet, so I don't
Yeah.
I don't actually know if I like the experience.
Yeah.
But conceptually,
Yeah.
it's my jam, and so much so that like here I am having never played the game before, and I have like a hack in mind that I'm
There you
actually
go.
pretty serious about.
Okay.
So
Very cool.
it's an ambitious idea. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but
It's super
yeah,
fun.
would
I
love to.
I was very lucky to play 2 games with Jay on stream with +1 EXP, and it was just a blast. One of the ones we did, both of them are extremely memorable. Like I play a lot of RPGs, and they really were memorable experiences, like stand out memorable experiences. And I can tell you exactly what they were. One chapter was doing laundry, and then the other chapter was going fishing, and they were exceptionally memorable. And like there's some beauty in the like simplicity of what they do, and the narrative structure of what they do. Yeah,
I'm so enamored by designers like Jay that are able to make slice of life interesting. Like I haven't quite gotten there yet with like, for me, I need like what's the high concept or something in my design, because it's just like it makes sense to me narratively. The slice of life stuff, like I listen to a lot of RPG podcasts and actual plays and that sort of thing, and those are my favorite episodes almost always, right? But I can't for the life of me figure out how I would design a slice of life game.
Okay, interesting. You'll get. I mean, we'll see. Maybe you'll find what yours is. That's kind of how it was for me with Broken, which is basically, I guess you could call it a slice of life game, breakup game. But like, it was just figuring out what mine was. I think that's kind of what it was. Well, that I'm like dying to like ask you your TTRPG backstory, because we're kind of like talking around it. So,
Sure.
how did you said it's new to you? So like, what's your backstory? What's your yeah.
Well, it starts at the young age of 5, I guess. I had the red box D&D. I don't even know what it was. I don't even know if it was the red box, but it was a red box, and it was D&D. And I was digging through the box, and found it very interesting, and it had a dragon on it. I mean, that's sick, right? And then my church told my mom that D&D is of the devil.
This isn't even planned. This is just perfect. But go on, yeah.
Yeah, and so it very swiftly left my house.
Ooh.
I did play Dungeons and Dragons one time, when probably in middle school or something like that. I don't remember the game at all. I remember. Do you remember those like stretchy elastic book covers that you would? They're like spandex book covers for school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting distracted from the game and wearing it like a superhero mask. That's what I remember.
All right.
Anyway,
That's
and
very
then
funny.
and then I didn't play any role-playing games again until adulthood.
Yeah, thanks God. No, just kidding. Sorry, I was right. By the way, you can now tell that church. Go back. You should go back and tell that church. By the way, and now I'm talking about TTRPGs and making them and talking about it with a priest. So there, take that.
Exactly. Take that.
Take that.
So the story I always tell is, so the pandemic changed a lot of things, and for me, one of those things that it changed was social connection. Like I'm already kind of like naturally a recluse, if you will. Like,
Okay.
and so then with the pandemic sort of like forcing that, I'm not a highly online person in general either, right? So I don't have a lot of like digital connections or friendships in general. So like I just sort of suddenly found myself without any outlet other than just being with my family, who I adore. But you need other things, right?
Yeah.
And I discovered, looking for a hobby, I guess, right? Because how I used to get connection a lot was playing basketball with a group of guys that I used to work with, and that stopped pretty abruptly with the pandemic as well. So I needed a hobby. I needed a way to fill some time that was just for me, and I got into game books. You remember, like, sort of choose your own adventure type things? Yeah. I'm looking at a stack of Fabled Lands books right now, and so got into that enough to start a podcast about that, which actually I think was more about the connections with those authors than it was about game books for me, right? And I made some cool friendships that way, and also kind of got really interested in creating, because I was like, man, I want to make a game book, right? By the way, if you're not familiar with the game book space, like the modern game book space, there's a ton of really talented writers that are creating books today.
That's awesome.
That absolutely deserve your time. You can think of it as sort of an echo of, like, these are the children of the 80s and 90s who enjoyed these as kids, and now they're making their own for themselves. So they're adult interest level.
Sounds really awesome.
Yeah. So go check them out. Not to exclude anybody, but just to name a couple of favorites, kind of off the top of my head. Victoria Hancock's is really amazing, makes sort of like psychological thriller and horror books. And Samuel Isaacson, probably most popular for his science fiction series. There's a number of them, but if you find them, you'll find the others. Anyway, back on track. Where was I? I'm telling you how I got into games.
You got to game books, and you were thinking about making game books.
And so, but the thing I found with game books, and this isn't what led me to RPGs. It's just like they're just hard to make. There's so much planning and writing involved with game books.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and also people have very high expectations for there being lots of art.
I was wondering about that. Yeah, expectations. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, it wasn't really a good outlet for me as a creator, but as a reader, it's a great hobby.
Cool.
But then I don't even know how I came across Itch, but I think what happened was I got interested in Ironsworn because first I got interested in D&D, but it was just too dang complex, and I couldn't find a group to play with, right? So I was just like, well, to heck with this. And I started playing solo with Ironsworn. Have you played Ironsworn before?
I have a little bit, yeah, just to like mostly experience how it works, the system.
Yeah. So it's a really cool system, and Sean Tonkin did an amazing thing by creating that first book and offering it for free. I probably wouldn't have tried it, frankly, if it wasn't free, because I wasn't sure about RPGs.
Yeah.
So, I didn't have any reason to believe I would like it except like, I'll try it, And I was amazed at the way that Ironsworn doesn't tell you a story, it pulls a story from you, right? And I think that was the moment that really hooked me on RPGs was, oh, wow, like it's not about making worlds for people, right? It's about making world building engines and letting people experience those, right?
Tools, right? It's giving people tools. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. And so then, the rest is history. I just, over time, I, honed in on my particular taste, and I tend to like quirky little games by indie designers. So I spend most of my time on itch. I have nothing against drive-through RPG, but just like for whatever reason, from a design perspective, like I can't find my way around on there. So I spend most of my time on itch and picking up games, participating in game jams, that sort of thing. So
very cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's so fascinating to me to hear, like, because what some of the discourses a lot of times in TTRPGs and indie TTRPGs is like the discourse around like D&D, is it complex? People a lot of times say like, oh, D&D, it's like, well, there's just like all that discourse that you see, and I don't know how much of it is real people saying real things or not, but you are a real person who was like, I'm going to start playing TTRPGs. Ooh, D&D seems complex that I have no one to play with, so I'm going to do this indie thing. Well, that's way easier. And just got into narrative games. And, like, it's funny because that is sort of you are instantly the poster child of all the indie creators who are constantly trying to say that thing, and it's like you're the real story of that.
Well, here's why I think it's true.
Yeah.
From my own personal experience. I think there's and actually some postulating outside of my personal experience too.
Sure.
I think there's like two cultures of play for D&D that allow people to kind of get into it. And one is the don't worry about it, just come play with the group and we'll help you know everything you need to know. So it's very like DM driven.
Yeah.
And I think that works really well. It wasn't available to me, so it couldn't work. Right.
Right.
And then the other is, there's somebody who's enthusiastic enough to, crack open the book and learn the rules. And I think that there's the sort of the pot of gold at the end of like, and then I'll get to play in worlds for years and years with my friends. Right. But for me, it's like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get people to play this game, that sort of thing. So that pot of gold wasn't there. And I'm like super high ADHD. So like trying to, without any real promise of it necessarily working out or paying off, trying to dig through a rules book, which frankly doesn't feel that well organized for the way my brain works, it just wasn't working.
Yeah.
So
that's it. You made a really interesting point, and sometimes we do get into issues of accessibility, issues of like things like that on the show. It's like something I do like to talk about. And my spouse is somebody with ADHD, and I have a child, at least one. I have one diagnosed ADHD child, probably 3 children with ADHD, but that's just me knowing them and guessing. And so like we kind of talk about that a lot, especially in my household. And like I'll just be blunt. I hope my wife doesn't mind me saying this. Like when I first started playing games with her, especially like D&D, it was like I was not the most accessible, friendly person to her neurodivergence around the table, because it was just like not what I was used to. And it took a little bit, and she actually wasn't diagnosed yet and had never been in her life until adulthood. So it was kind of like a new discovery in adulthood for her and for us. And so like, I've learned a lot about that, and like D&D. So my experience of it with her and with like figuring that out and stuff was that like D&D is not, at least for her, and maybe it was our table style, I don't know, but not the most ADHD friendly game she could play.
Right.
It was really easy for her to just struggle at the table. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I guess you probably haven't played. And yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what were there any specific moments that were the most difficult for her?
It's a good
I'm
question.
asking
Yeah.
because I have my own guesses, but
Okay.
anyway.
So that's a good question. It's hard for me to speak for her. I'd love to. I'll have to ask her after the stream, and she's actually not in the chat this week, so she can't even answer. But I will say, just noticing or running for her, there was a lot of like she was gone from the table a lot,
Hmm.
um, like prolonged sessions, especially of people dealing with other players, other characters. Would It was just really easy for her. It was like easy for her to like get up and do something else, go into the
Hmm.
kitchen, offer people to do like and helpful things like, hey, I'll get drinks for everybody from the kitchen. Anybody want any snacks? Things along those lines. That was my main memory of it. And as
Hmm.
someone that didn't understand the like kind of a phenomenon that was happening, I remember as a GM even thinking like, oh, am I just boring for her? Like, is that what's happening? Because I didn't understand what was happening. You know what I mean? And now that I have a different
Yep.
appreciation of it, a different experience, what kinds of things do you think are kind of a struggle for having
So
ADHD? Like,
I can extrapolate from game books because there's a variety of rule systems that are used in game books for combat, and the with RPGs, like I generally am not even going to give a game a chance I don't if I don't like the system on abstractly on a read through, that sort of thing. Um, Whereas with game books, there's the story, and I'm reading it for the story probably in the first place, and it's already written. Like it doesn't have to have a system that helps me generate a story, that sort of thing. Anyway, that was kind of a side track.
now it's good.
But there are systems that are there's a lot of dice rolling back and forth of like, and then I hit them, and then they hit me, and then I hit them, and then they hit me, and I'm like literally just like thinking about, oh man, did I forget to, that sort of thing. So I tend to change the rule systems on game books because I have certain preferences there. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I'm like hyper focus, and so as long as there's something to captivate my interests, I can focus in on it. But then I'm very quick to lose that focus if something doesn't retain my interest, like a tedious back and forth rolling system or something like that.
I hear you. I hear you. I mean, it's interesting that you say it that way because for me, that's with listening to actual plays. So like, I can't listen to actual plays that use systems where that's what the combat is like. And as far back as like listening to the Adventure Zone and I did listen to all of the balance arc of the Adventure Zone when it came out, but I couldn't pay attention during combat, which luckily
Yep.
wasn't a ton of that show. But like I'm just not going to pay attention. It's just my brain is not going to pay attention to that. It's just not. It's
Yep.
going to pay attention to God, anything else. Like anything else, it's going to grab onto. But it is when you described it as the back and forth kind of system, back and forth rolling attacking system, is just like, and maybe that is why I gravitate towards narrative
Yep.
games. That's
It's funny.
really
I've
interesting.
recorded a number of game book playthroughs that have systems like that, and I one of the things I do is I use a editing software that lets me sort of like automatically remove dead air, right? And so I do that, but combat just sounds so stupid when you remove the dead air because it's like 3, 1, 2, 5. Anyway.
That's really funny. Yeah, that's really funny. So, when you started playing like more narrative games, are there other than the ones you mentioned that you're interested in playing that you have the stack of? Are there any like that stand out for you as stuff that you really wanted to model your design after that you were just really like excited about, enamored by?
um Sorry, I was still thinking about my last statement. So,
Oops.
it was so when thinking about narrative games. Sorry,
Yeah.
could you just repeat the question?
Yeah, no,
Mhm.
you're all good. You're good. You're good. I was just like when you started getting into more narrative games. I know you already mentioned like games that you're interested in that you have a stack of over there, but like are there other ones that like really enamor you or that you're really excited about, or maybe even that
Yeah,
you kind of saw as like models for designing that you were like really
right.
intrigued by?
Yeah, so the belonging outside belonging system is a big one for me. And it's I haven't actually made a belonging outside belonging game. I have made a No Dice No Masters game actually, so I guess I kind of have. Um, but it's not. I wouldn't consider it the same thing. So there was a game by James Hanna, Bullfrog Jam, I think is. Anyway, the game is called Sabotage.
Okay.
Um, and it is a particular implementation. I think it's such a specific indicator of what my interests are. So Sabotage is a sort of a game about like labor unions, well, not really labor unions, but like laborers sort of fighting back against the factory that's not really treating them well by sabotaging the machines and
Okay.
that sort of thing. But what's so that's sort of on the narrative side, like
Yeah.
that's super cool, right?
Yeah.
And then on the design side, like even before we get to the mechanics, on the layout side, it's one page, just one page, right? And on that page, they've crammed in the rules, they've crammed in character creation, they've crammed in map right or drawing, right? They've crammed in sort of what's the word? Sort of wretched and alone style, like card driven prompts.
Okay. Wow,
And
that's
so
a
this
lot
is
on a page.
on a single page,
That's
and
a
it doesn't
yeah.
feel overwhelming either. Like
Yeah.
it's just such a masterwork of minimalist layout and
Wow.
fitting a lot into a page without it feeling overwhelming. It's also mechanically something I said there just shows sort of my interests too, right? It's kind of a kit bash, right? Because it's like, well, it's No Dice No Masters, but also it's kind of like Alone Amongst the Stars or the Wretched and
Right.
Alone style stuff, like, and let's bring these things together. And well, now it's only one page, so we kind of have to do away with some things. So we're going to get rid of playbooks and setting elements, that sort of thing, right? So I like that kind of thing a lot. Some of my favorite systems, just to list some, right?
Sure.
I love Belonging Outside Belonging. I love the Alone Amongst the Stars system. I like Wretched and Alone. Will Lentz, Game-Nomicon, yeah, has a really cool system called, oh my gosh, I made a game in the system and I can't remember what it's called.
It has to be all the time.
The Second Guess system.
Okay.
And it's really cool. I'm going to take a diatribe into this for a second because
Yeah.
what it attempted to do was, again, a kind of a kit bashy thing. It wanted to make a Wretched and Alone game on a single page. And, but like, well, if you need to make, 50, what is it, 56, however many prompts, you're not going to be able to do that on a single page and it, look good or, tell a story well. And so he did away with the cards and he just used a D20 and, so there's 20 prompts. But then wait a second, what happens if you roll the same number again? And then he's like, oh, well, you just revisit that prompt and say like, oh, I did, there was something I didn't know about it, or, discover a new clue or whatever it is, right? That's thematically appropriate. So anyway, really cool small system. So I like these small systems, and then I like sort of bastardizations of the systems where it's like the kit bash where you're like, I'm going to take some of that.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that.
Sort of thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it's amazing to me. Like, we're just like the theme of Holy Happy Hour Batman since it started has been the incredible boom that we're in of indie TTRPGs, which you touched on with talking about itch and like you're finding itch and exploring itch, and like it's just intriguing for me to hear you talk about this stuff because like all of that stuff, so many of those innovations in TTRPG design, so much of the amazingly creative stuff happening on one-page games and the stuff that you're talking about with narrative games and like so recent. It's all so recent. It's just happening right now and we're in the middle of it. And like, so it's just so cool. And it's cool. I don't know. I've been playing TTRPGs. I'm the other person that we talked about. I'm the one who's been playing since I was little consistently. And It's amazing to me. I love being able to just talk to creators like you who are like doing really interesting, innovative things, trying to say like, well, what if we did it all in one sheet? What if we like made it really newcomer friendly? What if it, and I just did, it's just amazing. That's not again not a question. Just like it's so cool to be in the middle of that particular boom of just really innovative, really creative stuff that's happening. Um, it was also, if I this is kind of a question, I guess. It's also like a bold thing to like want to say, okay, I want to start tackling those design things too. Was it a little bit intimidating for you to say, I'm going to try to design like this as a newer person to the scene?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I
Yeah.
think that there are some systems that really invite you in,
Yeah.
and make it feel almost like you can't not. You know what I
I
mean?
do
Like,
know what you mean. I do.
yeah.
I do.
And the first one that almost did that for me was the Wretched and Alone system, because it's so obvious, like how to, like once you've seen a game, it's like, oh yeah, I know how to make a game like this, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Now in practice, I found that actually making a Wretched and Alone game was difficult for my brain, and it wasn't for the reasons you'd think.
Hmm.
I think that there's a specific writing talent that I really admire and respect that I've been developing, which is, you know, basically prompt writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're not dictating your it's that pulling forth that I was talking about, that sort of thing.
Uh huh.
And you know, Chris Bissett, as an example, does that in a magical sort of way, right? But actually, for me, the challenge I had was that the system is so simple and obvious once you get it, right? Like once you've played one of those games, that like my brain couldn't let it be and had to like invent variations on it, right? And so much so that I have like a pile of probably about 30, not exaggerating. I was about to say 100. 100 would have been exaggerating. Probably about 30 like half starts to Wretched and Alone games that I just like, and then I was like, oh, and then I could do this and that, and then it just all kind of crumpled in on itself. Like, oh, that doesn't work actually, you know. The one thing that I did in Wretched and Alone that I think actually worked pretty well, was I have a game that's still in development but is available called Here and Far. And Here and Far this is another example of, I like collections, I guess. The concept of Here and Far is it's a collection of games where the theme is you're with someone but can't communicate with them, right? And so then it's different, you know, variations on that. So then what I did was I said, well, I don't want to have to write 56 prompts for every game that I want to make. So I really liked the way that Alone Amongst the Stars does the suits and the card values, but I didn't like the way that it's deterministic and like it's always like, really, even though there's 4 suits and 13, is that right? Card values, at the end of the day, like the combinations are like set, like those are going to be the combinations, right? And so I tried to, you know, change that. And so what I did is I did I can't even remember what I did with it yet. Oh yeah, I did the 13, not the 13, everything but the kings and aces number values as a set of prompts that were that would make sense in that generic theme of like you're with somebody but can't communicate with them, right? And then each game, all it brings is the 4 suits that bring the theme of the specific game into that, and the aces and kings, which give you the, you know, the sort of the win-loss conditions and stuff like that. And so it was a really interesting playtesting challenge to like, do these prompts actually work?
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so I want to kind of circle back to, you mentioned something earlier, which was that you your D&D red box got swept under the rug of the Satanic Panic, and we are now in a Satanic Panic memory renaissance of sorts with Stranger Things deciding to do a Satanic Panic season, and there's the Satanic Panic documentary came out recently, and so that was talked about a lot in a Gen Con and things. But just I'm curious about your that religious background that told you that this thing was of the devil and you shouldn't play it. Yeah,
Yeah.
tell us about that, like growing up in that kind of religious background, what it was like, what kind of what kind of religion it was, and whatever.
Yeah. So I grew up in Virginia in
Okay.
a Baptist first and then Presbyterian after. And
Okay,
the
where?
reason that
So sorry, where in Virginia?
it was
Or
in Northern Virginia.
Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I was wondering.
I won't go too specific
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I will say some things that are kind of maybe rude to the to the
Understood.
church. So like,
Understood.
yeah, and we did ultimately the reason that we left the Baptist church was there was some racial stuff. Not there wasn't any like currently active racial stuff, but like we found out about the church's history and we were like, oh gosh, like, and so we left that church, and then jumped around a few churches for a while, and then ended up at a Presbyterian church, and that was kind of our church family for many years, and ultimately ended up leaving that church a little bit more gradually, but it was sort of in some ways political and in some ways I don't know, like non-inclusiveness, right? So there was a pretty historic, I don't remember all the details of it, but there was because I was just a kind of twerpy teenager at the time, but there's a relatively historic like vote thing happening on like whether or not to allow gay pastors or something like that going on. And our church was like one of the standouts that was like, no, we can't let this happen. And I was like, okay,
Bummer.
So yeah, that's one of the reasons we stopped going there. And then what else was going on? Oh, it was even more basic than that, right? There was even questions of whether to allow women pastors, I believe,
Nice. I see.
happening. So yeah, all kinds of stuff going on. And I forgot where I was going with this. Oh yeah, and also church sermons changed from being about faith and started to be about upcoming elections.
Ah, I see.
And it was like, it just wasn't. There was nothing there for me. That
The growing Christian
and
nationalism of evangelicalism in the United States. Yeah.
right, exactly. And this church was. I wouldn't really necessarily describe it as an evangelical church. It was relatively traditional sort of setting. I actually thought the evangelical churches were so cool back then, right? Because I was a musician, and the music in those churches for me at the time, I was just like, wow, like
Yeah.
they play drums,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so I after we left that church, I was sort of old enough to kind of put my foot down and be like, I'm just not interested, Mom, that sort of thing. And so I never went back to a Christian church other than, just here and there with friends or family. I'd be like, sure, I'll come to church with you. And then, well, I'll pause there. I don't want to just ramble forever.
No, you were fine. You're fine. I was listening to your story, and I find it to be really interesting. Well, do your parents still go to church? If you feel like outing them, I guess, on the air here.
They did for a while,
Yeah.
and I think it took longer, but they kind of came to a similar place. So they're still believers, but I should say my mom in particular. My dad never really was much of a churchgoer in the first place because he was His church is on a lake fishing. Um, so that's what he does.
That's a cool church. That's a great church.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
really is.
There's some precedence for it in the Bible, as it
Absolutely.
turns
Yeah. No, no,
out.
yeah. Turns out, as it turns out, yeah. That's funny.
um, anyway, so my mom, it took her a little bit longer, I think, to recognize that church had become more of a political affiliation than a faith thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that she sometimes misses, but also like uh, it's still today. There's absolutely a challenge where I don't think she would step foot where she lives now. I don't think she would step foot into a church because she'd be afraid of the kinds of people she'd encounter there.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Frankly, so
I've just been thinking about that kind of thing a lot, especially actually in a coincidence sort of way. This morning, a large platform in Christianity that is not. So I'm an Episcopal priest. I'm in the Anglican world, but I do follow a couple people just because they're interesting. Because sometimes they're really deeply insightful. They have a lot of wisdom. But I follow some people who write about church issues but they're like in the more mega church world, in the more evangelical world, but not sort of in the like very right wing version of that, but are still very much in that world. And I read a very extensive article today from somebody in that world about like it was basically about, I mean, the long and short of the article was that it was trying to prevent a civil war, a coming civil war in the United States of America. And that sounds inflammatory, but it was very much like made an argument as to like, if you think that's too inflammatory, here's why maybe it's not, and here's what churches and pastors could do to try to avoid that. But it made some really interesting points, and one of the things it talked about extensively from a demographics perspective was the idea of like super factioning, and how like the United States in particular is like super factioning into right and left, like conservative, like Republican, Democrats, but groups that like you identify more primarily with that than anything else. Like talked a lot about indicators, how like the person you voted for in the last election is an indicator that's stronger than any other indicator for things like where you would go to church, or what stores you would shop at, or what kind of food you would eat. Things along those lines that are like these, like, so sociologists are talking about these like super factions. And one of the things I found really intriguing that's like the other side of what you're talking about is that more people now identify as evangelical who actually never go to church. But when they're asked in like a survey, they say they're an evangelical. And it's because the bigger group they participate in is aligned with that, right? So it's that like and that it's just really, so hearing your story and talking about that makes me think of that idea that like, yeah, I mean, I totally understand the fear of like that's being described, you know what I mean? Like that is right. Kind of the modern church in North America, and so your dad's probably the smartest one, going to church on the lake, you know, like honestly.
Yeah.
But did you like leave religion altogether, like spirituality altogether?
So for a while I did. I went through kind of a crisis of identity in college where I sort of dabbled conceptually, not really, but dabbled conceptually with a variety of things, and a lot of reading and whatnot, that sort of thing. And I don't want to name things because I have a feeling I'd accidentally be offensive in the way I talked about them because I don't know enough about them.
Oh, that's fair.
But anyway, I ultimately then spent some more years kind of as maybe I would have described myself as agnostic for a little while, and then ultimately came around to, no, I'm pretty confidently atheist, that sort of thing. And then more recently, several years ago, had more of a sort of like psychological trauma, if you will, where I was high anxiety and depression and all those sorts of things. And literally, I dragged my wife to a church, actually.
Really?
Maybe I need God, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And ran into my therapist there and ran back out of the church.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so, it was, I
That's
took that
just
as sort of
wild. Sorry.
a sign. Yeah, and it was also like, looking back, I'm glad that it didn't work out, because it was absolutely like an evangelical megachurch that
Oh,
I don't
okay.
want to like paint with broad
Yeah,
brushes,
sure.
but like, I have a feeling it wouldn't have been the crowd that I should have been around, that sort of thing. Anyway, um, and then eventually found, through MBSR, mindfulness based stress reduction,
Mm-hmm.
first, the mindfulness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was curious about the origins of that, and started reading about, Buddhism a lot, and then started digging into actual, uh, the actual texts of translated, Theravadan,
Mm-hmm.
Buddhist
Yeah.
scriptures. And I don't consider myself a Buddhist, but I do consider myself Buddhist inspired, if that makes sense. I
Sure.
think I called it earlier to you. I called it like Diet Buddhism or Buddhism Light or something like that. Um, Mindfulness is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're on a spiritual journey.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through waves, and right now I'm kind of in one of these sort of trough things where I haven't been as um, obsessed with it, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Um, I was at its peak. There were days when I would meditate for 4 hours, and
Wow.
things like that. Like, yeah, I
Wow.
took it pretty seriously, but it wasn't like I was just like a yellow robes kind of guy. It was just that I needed to,
Yeah.
or I was feeling like I would fall apart if I didn't, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and now I'm in a stage where, I have been for a while. I'm actually, at the moment, I could probably use some more, more of that. But I've been for a while in a stage where I'm, better off.
Well, I
And
was gonna say you're in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign now, so you probably do need to meditate a whole bunch, just to
yeah,
get. You
exactly.
need some Zen to keep you
Mhm.
sane, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah, I bet actually, the waves thing you mentioned, that is just 1,000% a common experience among people on any kind of spiritual journey for sure. Like when I think about,
Mhm.
and I say that as somebody that pastors people and is on his own spiritual journey. I mean, when I was in seminary, like you say, 4 hours of meditation. When I was in seminary, I remember being able to like meditate for very long periods of time, or to like have meditation sessions or whatever. And now I'm like at a point in my life where I've been lucky if I can meditate for a minute. Um, like I'm lucky, and like I every month I use a really cool book. It's actually right here next to me, and I have never pitched this on the show, but I'll use this opportunity. You might be interested in this because it's not like
Mhm.
a Christian thing at all. It's called it's called the Monk Manual. It's essentially a daily planner
Mhm.
that's rooted in kind of meditative spirituality, kind of like in a really loose way, a really option, but also in a deep way. Like it's so like for example, you do things on a daily basis, like you set like monthly habits and themes, but it does a lot. You have a lot of you build reflection into your day. Like you start your day by naming things you're grateful for, things you're looking forward to, and then you have a period at the end of the day for reflection. But like my monthly habit this month was meditating again, and so I've been reflecting on like, okay, what are the things that are getting between me and meditating? Like if I really want to meditate, like why am I finding it difficult? And like really trying to like get at where that's coming from in me. That like at the start of this month, I used to meditate for a long time too. At the start of this month, I could put on a 5 minute YouTube meditation and not get through it.
Mhm.
That's just where I
Yeah.
was. And I think I've maybe taken baby steps in 30 days. It's what 29 days. It's the 29th. I've taken baby steps in the last 29 days, like towards more than that, but also giving myself permission to like I've been doing morning prayer. What's really interesting is I for a while had gotten really bad at my habit of morning prayer.
Mhm.
My meditation goal though made me start doing morning prayer in the morning because it was like, well, I can't meditate right now, but I could do this. and now
Mm-hmm.
my morning prayer habit's gotten stronger again. So I don't know. Yeah, I think like it's like a common thing for it to like, come in waves and to kind of go to it when you need it. Maybe is that one? I don't know if that matches your experience or not.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I also think that there's something about the media we consume
Yeah.
and how what that directs your brain to. So, for example,
Mm.
right now I'm very RPG obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
It's RPG's fault. That's why I'm not in a
Yeah.
spiritual place right now. Anyway,
Yeah. Just like your church
so
said as a child. Sorry.
yeah, exactly. It is of the
The
devil.
satanic panic
Yeah.
was right all along.
Yeah.
Someone
But
should clip
I've
that.
been listening. Yeah, exactly. I've been listening to a lot of, RPG content, watching a lot of
Yeah.
RPG content, reading about RPGs, reading RPGs, all of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that has eaten up some of the time that I used to spend listening to, mindfulness podcasts and those sorts of things. I also reflect on the same thing with my wife. We're having some parenting challenges right now, and
Mm.
um, there was a time when we were reading a lot of parenting books and podcasts, and my wife, pointed out recently. She's saying, if if we would read these things more again, we'd probably be like in the right mindset more often to be good parents, that sort of thing. I think there's a lot to be said about how much media you consume and what media you choose to consume,
Mm.
about what mind space it puts you in.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I think it's really deep, and I think you're right about that. There is a book about this is so funny because I'm like, oh yeah, there's a book I bought a number of years ago about that. Started to read, never finished. I should probably go back to it, but it is basically about that. It is about it from a family and parenting sort of perspective, and
mhm.
like I kind of wish I had digested it better when I bought it than I did, because I think there's a lot of truth to what you just said, and I'm like, my kids are getting to an age now where I'm like, oh, I am not prepared for this. I should have, because my kids are like becoming like my oldest is 11, and my other two are just turning 11 and 6, and I'm kind of scared of the media that they might start consuming and that they have started to consume, and I feel unprepared, kind of for like I haven't just taken any steps to like really prepare myself for the ages that they're
Yeah.
entering into, and I think that what you said is so true that like I really need to be attentive to like how
Right.
media affects them and puts them in certain mindsets in certain spaces.
Yep. And I think it's not even just like you learn something and move on, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like finding a way to be steeped in it long
Mm.
term, right?
Yeah.
Is what makes the difference.
Yeah.
So bringing this around to like a Buddhist
Yeah.
concept, like karma is a popular word where, the Western conception of karma is like there's some cosmic judge or something that's going to, whatever. Um, and then, I have my own. The actual word means action, I believe, so there's not necessarily any direct correspondence to, like, oh, if you do something, it's going to come back around to you, that sort of
Right.
thing.
Right.
I take it to mean, my own sort of mantra, if you will, is karma is practice. And it's this idea that what you practice, you get good at, right? And so, there's a quote, I can't remember who said it. It's like, what people do to you is their karma. How
Mm.
you react is your karma. But
Mm.
anyway, bringing it
Mm.
back to this, um, so like if you spend time being happy, right, then you're practicing being happy,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If you spend time being angry, then you're practicing being angry.
Yeah.
If you spend time realizing that you're angry and choosing to move to a more wholesome mental state,
Yes.
which is right effort, right, then you're practicing recognizing anger and moving to more wholesome
Mm.
states, right? And so as it relates to media, if you listen to media that's about how to put yourself in better mind states, or media that's about how to better handle challenging conflicts with your children or whatever it is, you're much more likely to be in the right mind state to do that when it comes up.
It's going to sound crazy, but I started watching. So because I was doing the crowdfunding campaign for my game Broken, I wanted to consume the opposite of like. Although it really backfired. But I wanted to consume the opposite of tragic romance. I wanted to consume like positive romance stories and kind of trashy ones. I was like, and I wanted to like do. So I was watching some reality television around romance.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so I kind of started going down some rabbit holes I had never gone down for that. But actually, I started like getting way too into Married at First Sight. Do you happen to know that show?
I do.
Yeah.
I actually have a ex-colleague who was on one of the shows. I won't say which one.
Okay. Okay. All right. So what I didn't expect, and I started watching it from the very beginning of the show, which was like 12 years ago or something. And what I didn't really expect was actually to find that the foundation for that show is like actually trying to how do marriages actually work. Mm-hmm. And even though it's a reality show where there's a lot of fighting and there's like reality TV show nonsense to it, and also a lot of other kind of baggage to that show that I won't even bother getting into now. But it is a very heteronormative sort of thing. You know, it is what it is.
Right.
But like it did put me into mind spaces to really think about conflict, marital conflicts, like partner conflict, spousal conflict, and like the way we choose to. It's interesting because I think like one of the things I've learned from that show, or that I knew but I really re-emphasized for me, was like choosing to commit to things in people, choosing to that like things like love and marriage are like really a choice of commitment, like more than anything else. So it's been interesting how like consuming that media, it like is not what I expected. Like it like did something else in me than I was kind of expecting, and like in kind of a good way, even though it's reality television, which I definitely was not expecting. But yeah, I don't know. I think you're 100% right that I love the idea of practice. Like that's what that is kind of the foundational concept of the monk manual I was talking about, is like the things we practice every day are the things that we become and are. And I think that's just beautiful. This conversation has been very encouraging for me personally, so I appreciate being able to talk about some of this like mystical and sort of meditative stuff.
Cool.
I did not know it was going to be such a spiritual conversation when we went into it.
I've been enjoying it. Yeah, I've been enjoying it.
So can you please like give people updates on like where's the Kickstarter now? Give us some sales pitchy type stuff. Yeah. I would ask you. So one of my questions I usually ask people at the end of the show is like, what are you working on next? But I feel like this is also your answer to that, because it seems like you've got a lot of work ahead of you.
It is. Yeah, I've got other ideas in mind, but for now, my focus is going to be on this. And actually, I there's somebody that I'm very excited to hopefully bring on to help me complete some of these games. I don't want to name drop yet because it might not work out.
Sure.
But I think, you know, you can read into that what you will.
Okay.
Anyway, One Night Worlds, Zero Prep GM-less, one-page TTRPGs on Kickstarter right now until September 6th, I think it is. I should probably know the date when it's going to end.
I believe
September
it's 10 days,
9th.
isn't it? September 9th, okay.
Yeah, September 9th. Is that right? Yeah, that's it. So, you know, back it before then. You can back it for just $1. And really you're going to get a lot for just that $1. So my big surprise is that a lot of people have been choosing to back it at the $10 level, which adds the what I call the campaign edition, which adds playbooks and settling elements and things that are inspired from BOB design systems, and brings it into the push system. Right now we're at, we just crossed $5,500, which means that we have smashed through somewhere around 13 or 14 stretch goals.
Wow, that's a lot of stretch goals.
Yeah. So the thing there is Tony from Plus One XP. Yeah. How do you pronounce that? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the right way is. I know how I always say it, but I always just say EXP, but I don't know if that's correct. It could be XP. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he was kind enough to look at the preview page and give me some feedback, and really helped me simplify my message, and so kudos to Tony.
Friend of the show,
And one
Tony
of the
Vicinda.
things,
He's awesome. We love Tony here.
yeah, and a great content creator too. So check out Plus One XP. Um, anyway, one of the things that he didn't directly tell me to do, but like his feedback sort of inspired me to do, was to really widen out what the stretch goals that I had intended were. And then from there, I was like, but I actually want more stretch goals so that I have reasons to be updating people, right? I don't want to have to invent reasons. I want to have real reasons to update people. And so I ended up cutting them into smaller bits. And it's been cool for me too, because it means that there's something to be excited about all the time. I found that watching the number tick up is cool and all, but having a specific next milestone to see it go over is a big difference and really exciting. Anyway, I went off the sales pitch.
Yeah, no,
Let me get back
good.
on the sales pitch.
You're good.
So One Night Worlds, it's a collection of 5 games now. And with the campaign edition, you get a world guide and character playbooks and setting elements, and a solo toolkit now for several of the games if you prefer solo play, and some optional advanced rules if you want a little bit more mechanical heft with the games. Some of the games it's more mechanical heft. Other games it's deeper thematic stuff. Yeah, and all of that for just $10 if you want, the whole kit and caboodle, so to speak. You
Nice.
can find that just by searching One Night Worlds on Kickstarter, or searching my name, Brian Hazzard, on Kickstarter.
Absolutely.
And if you want to follow the progress of it, if you want to
No,
follow
you're
the
fine.
the progress of it, you can also check me out on Twitter at InstaDeathPod.
Awesome. Yeah, I also linked the campaign in the chat right now on Twitch as we're live, and it'll be in the show notes on people right now. So if you're watching this after the fact, just go down to the show notes for YouTube or Twitch, and you will see the link for Kickstarter there also. And I'll put the Instadeath Twitter and all that stuff in the show notes also. So cool. Well, thank you very much, Brian, for taking the time to come on the show during your campaign. I know campaigns are a very busy time, so I appreciate you, taking time out of your campaign to come and talk to us about both the games and spirituality and stuff like that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate your time as well, Ben. Thank you for having me on.
Sure. And I will just say a last personal note about it. I am really excited to eventually get Holding Darkness Within and bringing that horror setting to my game club, because we love horror.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to ask Brian to hang out here in our digital back room, and I'm going to go back to just me here so we can wrap the show up. Thanks again to everybody for watching. Huge thanks again to Brian for coming on the show. It just was a really lovely chat, and I deeply appreciate Brian taking the time to come on. I hope you all will go back. I mean, I don't know what you're possibly waiting for. It's $1 to back One Night Worlds, and I don't know if I've ever seen a Kickstarter where you get so much for $1. So seriously, it's kind of a no-brainer, and you can consider that $10 level if you want to. Please don't forget to hit the follow button if you are watching this on Twitch, or consider subscribing to the channel on Twitch, which I deeply appreciate. It helps sustain these things that we do. If you only caught part of tonight's show, you'll be able to watch it on demand for a brief time here on Twitch, but you'll be able to find Holy Happy Hour Batman on YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And hey, maybe you're watching it there right now. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the little bell so you get notified when we're going live or when there's another episode that's about to drop. Huge thanks to Joshua Wise for the artwork on the stream that you see, and thanks to Doctor Octoroc for the use of his music on the show also. I just remembered I promised you all last week that I'd come back this week with more information on Doctor Octoroc's next Kickstarter campaign. He's doing a Kickstarter campaign to do a chiptune cover album for the Beck album, and it just went right out of my head. So I failed my promise. I did not prepare to talk about it a whole bunch more. There's Mouseberg's making jokes about syrup in the chat, and I'm missing it. I feel like I'm missing out on the humor here. What, poor Demerara, that they got turned into syrup, more like poor I think I missed the joke, so just gonna keep on going. Yeah, what was I saying? All right, well, I will try to remember, we won't have an episode next week. We're actually on hiatus for Labor Day next week. I hope you find some time to enjoy a nice holiday weekend for yourself if you're able to. For those who are able, I'm not always making you drink, people. Mossberg, that's not true. And my wife is not on to also join in the jokes. But the week after that, we are going to have a couple of Drakes on the show, who is a really fun game design team who does really awesome work. So you're not going to want to miss that episode. That's in 2 weeks from tonight, September 12th. We'll be back with another great episode. Same bat time, same bat channel here with a couple of Drakes coming on to talk about their work, like Court of Blades and other games like that. So you are not going to want to miss that. So, all right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Have the holiest and happiest of hours, my friends. And we look forward to seeing you all here in 2 weeks. Have a very good night.
Calling all citizens of Halcyon City. The newest generation of heroes are now painting the pages of Delinquent Comics, a Masks new generation actual play podcast. Complete back issues are available now on allportsopen.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are found. You can help join the fight and hear the newest releases early by becoming a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/allportsopen. New bi-weekly episodes become available to all citizens on May 24th, featuring the newest arc, The Sunset Island Saga.